नमस्तर्वेभ्यः। IIT मद्रास् संस्थायाः संस्कृतसमितेः एवञ्च सन्त राजेन्द्र सिंह जी महाराज चेर् इत्यस्य उभयस्य आश्रये मुद्राराक्षसम् अधिकृत्य प्रवर्तमानानि प्रवचनानि आङ्ग्लभाषया अनुवर्तन्ते. We were in the fourth act where there was a conversation between Malayaketu and Rakshasa, and Rakshasa points out how in the case of persons who are Swayatta Siddhi, the disaffection of the minister is not going to be cause a great damage. Whereas in the case of king who are either Ubhayayata Siddhi or Sachivayata Siddhi, especially, the disaffection of the minister is going to create a great damage. So we are towards the close of the fourth act, and we will be commencing the fifth act. Today is 30th, and we will be observing Martyrs' Day. So at 11 o'clock, we will stop the talk for a while. For 2 minutes, we are supposed to observe silence, and then we shall resume the talk. Those who may come late may miss what I have said, but I will indicate at that moment also that we are going to stop for a while. Now, in this dialogue between Rakshasa and Malayaketu, Rakshasa gives the indication that in the case of kings who are Sachivayata Siddhi, that is, wherein the minister makes most of the decisions, or all the key decisions are made by the minister, then there will be a problem for the king. In the case of Chandragupta, this is what's happening. As we have seen in the previous act, there is a conflict between Chanakya and Chandragupta, and Chanakya has now been dethroned from his office, and therefore, once he is removed from his office, Chanakya would not be in any way helping Chandragupta, and therefore Chandragupta will be weakened. And Rakshasa gives two analogies to drive home to Malayaketu the importance of the role of the minister in case of Sachivayata Siddhi kings. And the two examples that he gives are, one is of a Chakshur Vikala, a person who has lost sight or is destitute of eye, and he will not be able to see things. So it is the minister who was serving as his very eye. So in Sanskrit or in Indian tradition, much more than speaking of someone who is very important as the right-hand man, he is shown as the very eye of the person, because even more important than the hand, it is the eye that directs even the hand to do certain acts or refrain from some acts and so on. And so, as it is essentially a question of discrimination and decision, so the intellectual aspects that are donned by the minister, that role is donned by the minister. Here, Chandragupta would be seriously deprived of those facilities, and therefore he is like a person who is blind and therefore cannot see things properly in the right perspective. So that becomes a great problem. And he also gives the analogy of a child, a suckling child weaned away from the breast of the mother. And in both cases, we see the utter helplessness of the person who is dependent. And in the present case, it is Chandragupta who is dependent upon Chanakya and bereft of the support from Chanakya, the help and guidance from Chanakya. Chandragupta is bound to suffer a great deal. And even while um, Rakshasa is describing the pitiable role of a Sachivayita Siddhi king, Malaiketu speaks to himself and says, luckily, I am not Sachivayita Siddhi. So, Dishtya na Sachivayita Siddhirasmi. So, which is to say, in a way, it is as though the words of Rakshasa are ultimately driving home a lesson to Malaiketu that he must also be able to think independently of Rakshasa. So, while Rakshasa is no less intelligent than Chanakya, and while Malaiketu, who too is new to his office, new to the office of a king, and is only a king in the waiting, so Malaiketu would as much need the guidance of Rakshasa as Chandragupta would need that of Chanakya. And in fact, the need of Malaiketu can be said to be greater than the need of Chandragupta. And however, already, even by the words of the Rakshasa himself, the feeling that I must act independently and I must think independently, the seeds of such thoughts have been sown in the mind of Malaiketu, and we can see the distance between Malaiketu and Rakshasa continually growing. And he says, Dishtya na Sachivayita Siddhi Asmi. So I am not a king who is Sachivayita Siddhi, that is to say, whose um, actions are dependent solely upon the minister. And while he speaks these words to himself, he also speaks aloud and says, so he continues the conversation with Rakshasa and says, well, sir, as you say, even though there could be very many causes, so which would suit the occasion of an attack on the foe, still, a situation like this, where the king, dependent upon the minister, is now disaffected with the minister, and there is no love lost between the king and the minister. So that becomes a sort of the weakest moment of the enemy, and this would indeed be the right time, the best time to attack the foe, and the result will be very definite and final. So success is guaranteed. Aikantiki karya siddhi. Aikantiki means where there is no option, where there is no multiplicity of possibilities. So, which is to say that success is guaranteed, made certain. So, ekanta or aikantika or aikantiki, because karisiddhi is feminine. So, aikantiki karisiddhi bhavati. So, success is ensured on account of the situation where there is a serious disaffection between the king and his prime minister, his chief minister. And Rakshasa underscores the same point and says, indeed so, that success is guaranteed. And he gives four reasons for the possibility of success here. And he says, number one is you as a king have the strength of a great army force. That's reason number one. Reason number two is the citizens of Pataliputra are themselves more affectionate towards the erstwhile Nanda king. And number three is now Chanakya is totally averse to helping Chandragupta. And that becomes, as you saw, one of the most important reasons. And number four is Maurya is but a new king. So that is Chandragupta is enthroned only recently, and therefore he is not going to be very powerful and very dynamic. And very intelligent and perceptive, and so on. And reason number 5 actually is Rakshasa presenting himself as being totally going as per the guidance of Malayaketu, in the sense that he is always there ready to help him, always at his beck and call, Swadhine Mai. And my task is only indicating the path and the direction. So, and now the only thing that is preventing us from accomplishing our goal is the decision, a clear-cut decision from Malayaki, Tadvanchhantaritani, so Sadhyani. So our goals have only one blocking, namely that you must make up your mind and declare war. So it is for that but one thing that things are waiting. Malik asks, if that is the case, then why are we waiting? So what are we waiting for? So then he says, well, let our army now get up and let our elephants now wade through the Shona River. There are two beautiful verses describing the march of the army towards Pataliputra. So, and then we must approach now the Vindhya, and we must be able to attack Chandragupta. So abruptly, Malayaketu exits along with Bhagarayana, and Rakshasa now asks, so the doorkeeper, as to whether there is any astrologer there. So Samvatsarikanam Dwarikas Tishtat. So who among the astrologers is there? And the doorkeeper says, Kshapanaka is there. Kshapanaka Jivasiddhi is his name. So Kshapanaka is a Jain friar. So the very the reply of the doorkeeper is in two words, namely Kshapanaka and Jivasiddhi. The moment he says Kshapanaka, it sends some thoughts in the mind of Rakshasa, and who speaks to himself, Pagata. So, and says, oh, this is a bad omen. Katham prathamameva kshapanaka. It is said that when you set out for some important task, if you see a kshapanaka, a Jain friar or a Buddhist monk, so then your task will not be accomplished. This comes as a part of the Shakuna Shastra, or the science of omen. So, on the other hand, the sight of a Sumangali, for example, is said to ensure some success, and the sight of a non-odd number of Brahmins, so is said to be a sign of success, and so on. So it's essentially a question of some kind of success regarding pravritti marga, and therefore even the sight of a prostitute is said to be a shubha. And rather than any kind of politics here, so it is only a question of the task that you set out for, and the possible indications and their interpretations, and so on. And as a Kshapanaka, a Jain friar or a Buddhist monk, or more in the path of the Nivritti Marga, their sight is said to be inauspicious, and therefore doesn't bode success for the enterprise. And therefore, Rakshasa feels, Katham Prathamameva Kshapanaka. Oh, right at the outset, when I am about to consult an astrologer, you're mentioning Kshapanaka, so a Jain friar. So, and though he says Jivasiddhi is his name, Rakshasa says, Vibhatta Darshanam Praveshaya. So, please send him in a presentable form. These Jain friars, especially if they belong to the Digambara sect, so they are hardly dressed, and therefore that would certainly be something rather bibhatsa and loathsome in appearance, and he knows that such an appearance would be very revulsive on the one hand, and would definitely be indicative of a failure of the enterprise, and therefore let him come in a presentable fashion. So, and then Kshapanaka is ushered in, he enters and he says, well, listen to the Jain friars. So they will give you some excellent advice. It looks bitter in the beginning, but in the end, it will yield some good fruit. So actually, this is a sort of a prognostication of what's now going to happen. The dialogue between Kshapanaka and Rakshasa, and the way the words are framed by Kshapanaka. So they are clearly indicative of the events that are going to happen, and the words of Kshapanaka are somewhat bitter, and in fact, the two will very shortly part ways, as it were, Kshapanaka in an angry mood and so on. So it's bitter in the beginning, but ultimately it's going to be good at the end. So ultimately, if Rakshasa unites with Chandragupta, well, it will be something good. So Muhutra Matra Katukam Paschat Pathyam. So that is the kind of the Upadesha that these Kshapanakas can give. And then Rakshasa asks him. So Rakshasa knows this Kshapanaka for quite some time. And so he asks, what is a good time for setting out, so for declaring war against Chandragupta? And then Kshapanaka gesticulates, doing some calculation, and then he says, post this afternoon, we have the full Purnamasi, so with the full moon, and as you are going from the north to the south, your expedition is from the north to the south. I think this is a good constellation which is favorable to you. And he says, you can see that the Surya is Astabhimukha, so he is about to set, and then the moon, the full orb of the moon, is about to arise as it is Purnamasi, and there is this Buddha Lagna, and Ketu is partly risen, partly set. So Rahu is risen, Ketu is set, and therefore this, I think, is a good day for you. And then, of course, even this verse, you can see the undercourse of the suggested meaning here, namely that Surya is Astabhimukha. The word for Surya both of them are speaking in the Prakrita language. So this Kshapanaka is speaking in the Prakrita language, and Rakshasa is, of course, speaking in Samskrita language. And this Kshapanaka is using the word Sura for Surya. So, of course, it is there in Sanskrit also. So, Athai Muhe Sure. So, when the sun is setting, so Astabhimukhe Surye. The word Sura in the present context can also refer to the hero, the heroic person, namely Malayaketu. And so there is the suggestion of Malayaketu going to be drowned now. So he is going to meet his end now. So he is Astabhimukha, about to set. So Malayaketu is now shortly going to set. So he is going to be finished. And then Udite Sampurna Mandale Chandre, now with his full setup, the moon is going to rise, referring obviously to Chandragupta. He is now going to ascend. So with his full force, so with all his paraphernalia and all that, so he is going to rise. He is going to scale great heights. And Gamanam Buddhastya Lagna. So Buddha is a reference to not only to Mercury, the planet, but also to the wise man, referring to Chanakya himself. And then Buddhastya Lagna is conjoining with Chanakya. So ultimately, as we see at the end of the play, Rakshasa is going to join hands with Chanakya, and therefore Udita Astamite cha Ketau, and this Ketu is also um, partly risen, partly set. Therefore, this Rahu is rising and Ketu is setting and so on. And therefore, this is the right time for you. And Rakshasa is not himself ignorant of astrology. And he says, well, sir, the very tithi that you are pointing out, namely Purnamasi, is not a good one for enterprises like this. So, Tithirevana Shuddhyati, therefore, there is no Tithi Shuddhi at all. And how can you suggest this day as the best day? You can see that the whole situation is one of some kind of a confusion. Things are taking place in a hurry, and Malaiketu asked him, why are we waiting? So Rakshasa himself indicated that it is because Malaiketu has not taken a decision yet, that the army has not started its march against Chandragupta. And Malaiketu asked, then what are we waiting for? And then when Rakshasa indicated that if Malaiketu says, yes, we can start right away. So start our march right away against the enemy. And therefore, a somewhat abrupt decision is taken, and things are now getting ready for the march against the enemy. And still, he now wants to get a confirmation from this Kshapanaka, who is a Samvattarika, an astrologer, as to whether things are fine. But um, uh, things are all showing a negative trend and direction here. The he could not get a good astrologer who is not a Kshapanaka. So if he had met with a Vedic astrologer, perhaps he would have been more happy. But the appearance of this Kshapanaka itself sent some revulsive reaction in the mind of Rakshasa, and then he also is saying this verse and suggesting Purnamasi, etc. And the very words are indicative of the success of Chanakya and Chandragupta rather than that of Malaiketu and Rakshasa here. And Rakshasa is a bit puzzled and says that there is no Tithi Shuddhi. So the Purnamasi is not certainly a day commendable for marching against the enemy. And then Chapanaka has his own reason. He says, do you know that there is this ratio of 1:4:64? So regarding the importance of the Tithi is to Nakshatra is to Lagna. So there is to say, if Tithi is 1 unit powerful, then Nakshatra will be 4 times that, 4 units powerful, and the Lagna will be 64 times more powerful than that. And therefore, this is the Jyotish Tantra Siddhanta. And therefore, I have the Muhurta that I have been suggesting is indeed a strong one and a good one and a correct one. So, and therefore, if you go by the strength of Chandra, I am sure you will get some good labha. So, even though the Saumya Graha is Durlagna, so still, so obviously Saumya once again refers to Buddha, referring indicative of Chanakya and so on. So still, you will be going by the strength of Chandra, it is. So the words are all so very well praised. The author of the play, Mudrarakshasa, undoubtedly was a master in Jyotisha also. As you can see that even Rakshasa could fairly judge whether the Jyotishika is suggesting a good date or whether it is a bad date, and Shapanaka himself is able to go into the certain subtleties of the Muhurta setting and so on. So altogether you can see that the author of Mudra Rakshasa is quite knowledgeable in even Jyotisha. So, and anyhow, Rakshasa is not quite happy with the decision, with the verdict that is given by Kshapanaka, and unable to repress himself, he even says, well, Mr. Kshapanaka, why don't we have a consultation with some other astrologers also in addition? aparais samvattarikais saha samvaditam. So, can't you get this checked and confirmed with some other astrologer too? Now, Shapanaka naturally would be very angry. So, if you go to an astrologer and consult him and um, ask him whether he must consult another astrologer, he would naturally be irked by such a suggestion. And just with going to a doctor and asking whether some other doctor should also be taken into um, account, or his opinion to be taken into account and consulted and so on, it naturally irritates the doctor. And even so for this Kshapanaka. So there is a saying in Sanskrit, Pandita Panditam Drishtva Shvanavad Gurgurayate. So indicative of the rivalry between Pandits and so on. And therefore, when Rakshasa says there should be perhaps be some consultation with some other astrologer also, then Shapanaka says, okay, you please go ahead. I am leaving. So, and Rakshasa could easily see that Shapanaka has been infuriated, and just to appease him, he says, I hope you are not angry with me. So, Kupito na Yushmakam Nakalu Kupito Bhadantaha. So, hope you are not angry with me. And Kshapanaka says, this Bhadanta is not angry with you. This Kshapanaka is not angry with you. So, obviously, leaving an impression that someone else is angry. So, then Rakshasa asks, who then is? So, who then is angry with me? And he says, Bhagavan Kritantaha. So, it is destiny that is unfavorable to you. Destiny that is angry with you. So, providence is in no way favorable to you. The word Kritanta not only means destiny, it also means Yama. So, therefore, it is Yama who is angry with you, that is your Paksha. So, that is to say, this forebodes the destruction of the Malayaketu and his army, etc. And therefore, it's Yama who is angry with you. And after all, you have abandoned your own Paksha and have gone to the opposite Paksha. So, obviously, Chandragupta could be a Swapaksha for him, and Malayaketu could be a Parapaksha for him, and nevertheless, Chanakya has made up his mind not to go with Chandragupta, but on the other hand, go with Malayaketu. And this is itself is indicative of a sort of a betrayal, and this pointed reference to that can also, in a way, demoralize Rakshasa. And anyhow, with the exit of Kshapanaka, so Rakshasa is a bit upset, and he asked the porter as to what time is it now. So, and the porter Priyamadaka says that the sun is about to set. Astabilashi Bhagavan Suryaha. And the Rakshasa utters the words in which he compares the shadow of tree at the time of sunrise and at the time of sunset, saying at the time of sunrise, the shadows are long. So in the western direction, it is like people who are overly eager to please a master who is on the ascendant. And while the sun is set, the shadows of trees are all facing away from the setting sun. Prayo bhritya stijanti pracharate vibhavam swaminam devamanaha. And therefore, when the king is on the wane, when his influence is on the wane and he is on the descendant, so even those who apparently were loyal to him will all turn away from him. So with this pessimistic note, this fourth act closes, and we are about to commence the fifth act. So, there are time. So we shall stop the talk for about 2 minutes. So then we shall resume. Now we shall commence the fifth act of the play. In the fifth act, it begins with a Praveshaka. A Praveshaka is a piece which is prefixed to the commencement of the main act. And in a Praveshaka, there are two characters who are speaking. Both of them will be speaking in Prakrita language. So here we have Siddharthaka and Kshapanaka who are speaking. So we just saw Kshapanaka leave Rakshasa in an angry mood. And here is Siddharthaka, who is also um, extremely loyal to Chanakya. And it was he who saved the life of Shakatadasa and has come over to the side of Rakshasa and so on. So Chanakya had indicated in the very opening act that Dhartaka must pretend saving Shakatadasa and take him to Rakshasa, and Rakshasa will be very pleased with Shakatadasa's life being saved, and you must stay with Rakshasa for some time, and if he gives any gift, then do receive them. So don't, out of a sense of humility, not receive them, but do receive them. And also note that the life of Rakshasa is extremely important, and ensure that there is never damage and so on. All these things, instructions had been given. So, and therefore, Siddharthaka is now saying he is going to reach Pataliputra with a bag in hand and a letter in hand. So the bag has some ornaments, and there's also this letter. Of course, the seeds for the events here have already been sown in the first act, and you can see that in the very first act was indicated to him, a letter was given to him. So the letter was in the handwriting. While writing, Shakatadasa did not know from whom is this letter being addressed and to whom it is addressed and so on. And many things were kept vague. And it is also indicated that the person who carries this letter would give some more information. So that has not been given in the letter itself. And with these things, so he is now here, and there is also he also has a bag of ornaments. So the ornaments were given by Rakshasa himself, and Chanakya had made excellent arrangements for even these, and therefore it is some of these ornaments are the ones of Malayaketu, and therefore all these are going to stand in good stead, as you can see a little later. So, and Siddharthaka says that the creeper in the form of Chanakya's Neti, how wonderful it is. So, Ashcharyam, he says, it is being regularly watered by the streams of the water in the form of the Buddhi of Chanakya. And the waters are poured with pots in the form of the right desha and kala. So the appropriate time and place. The timing of actions is also extremely important for niti to bear fruit, and therefore even that is there. And it's only at the proper hour that the great fruits see, borne by this niti lata, so will become evident. So till then it does not become evident, and therefore, however, there is proper attention that is being paid by timely watering of the plant. So let's just say actions are very well placed and very well timed, and therefore the Deshakala Kalasha, so time and space are represented metaphorically as pots, and the buddhi is the water, and then the creeper is Chanakya's niti, and it is going to bear great fruits. So Karya Phalam Gurukam Darshayishyat. So this is the beauty, the wisdom of Chanakya, says Siddharthaka, and he says, I have with me two items Namely, there is this letter which is the stamp of the seal of Rakshasa itself. And then there is also this bag of ornament which also has the seal of Rakshasa. Now, it is because of the presence of these two seals that we see that a great deal of confusion is sown in the mind of Malaiketu. And Malaiketu is able to recognize the seal. So they are the very important seals. So it is why when Siddharthaka is later caught, Malaiketu says, open the bag and ensure that the seal is not broken. So that is the importance of this seal, and this will be produced in front of Rakshasa himself. So this will be shown to Rakshasa, and it is as though he is caught red-handed, and therefore he brings himself into a situation from which he cannot extricate himself, and therefore a lot of evidence is mustered to show that Rakshasa is guilty. And all these are innocent happenings in the beginning, but bear fruit at the right time, in a right manner, and in the right proportion. And therefore, he has made this announcement, and then enters this Kshapanaka, and he says, oh, let's all go down to this Arhant, and Siddharthaka goes down to him, and Kshapanaka says, well, you seem to be traveling to some place. And Siddharthaka asks him how does he guess, and he gives two reasons. So one is the omen of the birds, and the second one is that there is some letter in the hand of Siddharthaka, and these two indicate that he is setting out somewhere. And then Siddharthaka says, well, I am now leaving this country and going elsewhere, and asks him, can you please tell me whether this is a good day for my travel? And Kshapanaka laughs at him and says, Mundita mundo nakshatrani prichhasi. It is as though a person has had his shave, and then after the shave is over, he is making the inquiry as to whether the asterism was proper. So once he has already set out on the journey, well, what is the point in asking whether the timing is good? So before a person commences his journey, he is supposed to get to know whether the timing is proper. But on the other hand, he's already set out and is now making an inquiry as to whether the time is auspicious and whether it bodes success for him. And then Siddharthaka says, okay, what even now? So if it is favorable, I will go, otherwise I will return. And Kshapanaka warns him that, see, this Malaiketu Kataka, of the camp of Malaiketu, is something not favorable now. And he also indicates that earlier there used to be a free travel, so people could come and go without any problem. But now that Pataliputra is close by, so things have changed now, and whoever has no passport with him, so will not be allowed to either go out or come in. And therefore, here is the camp of the Malaiketu and Bhagurayana, and it is only upon receiving the passport from Bhagurayana that a person can go. Otherwise, if he still tries to go, then he will be held captive and he will be properly handled by the police. And then Siddharthaka says, well, don't people know that I am very close to Rakshasa, and therefore I don't need any passport? And Kshapanaka says, go to either, you may be close friends with either Rakshasa or a Pishacha, does not matter. So you will see that without the proper passport, you will not be allowed to go. So Rakshasasya Pishachasya va bhava. So already the burning anger against Rakshasa is very evident here in the words of Kshapanaka. So who places together Rakshasa and Pishacha, and therefore his contempt for Rakshasa is very evident here. And then Siddhartha asks still asks him, okay, please tell me, don't be angry, and just tell me whether I'll be success, whether I'll meet success my enterprise. And Japanaka says, okay, may you be crowned with success. And the Praveshika comes to an end. Then enters Bhagurayana, and we see here Bhagurayana and Malayaketu, and ultimately Rakshasa is also ushered in, he is summoned, and then there is an inquiry that is going on. So, and finally, the credentials of Rakshasa are established to be very doubtful, and therefore he is suspected of treachery. So the person who was most known for his loyalty is now condemned for treachery, all because of the machinations of Chanakya. And Bhagurayana, so he first into the stage after the exit of Kshapanaka and Siddharthaka. So actually Bhagurayana, though he is along with Rakshasa and Malayaketu primarily, so still he is an agent of Chanakya, as you have seen in the very first act. And so it's all very, very planned. And Bhagurayana expresses this great admiration for the Niti of Chanakya. We saw that this act began with the words of Siddharthaka, also in praise of the Niti of Chanakya, and Bhagurayana also speaks words in admiration of the Niti of Chanakya. And he says, look at the Niti of Chanakya, his Rajaniti, his political wisdom. So it's quite like providence itself. Niyatiriva nitihi naya vidaha, and it's chittakara of varied forms. So at one point of time, you can see the seed sprouting, but in the next moment, it just disappears and you do not know where it is. So you feel that the seed is gone, and so nothing going to progress. And suddenly it now looks full-fledged. And once again, in just the next moment, it looks so feeble that it is on the wane. And then in another moment, it is as though it is all completely destroyed. But then you find all of a sudden that it has already borne a lot of fruits. And therefore, aho chitrakara neyatiriva netir nayavidaha. So such is the scheme of Bhagurayana. And then he says, because he is now setting up the office of the passport bestower, he says, I want my camp to be, my seat to be close to Malayaketu's camp. And he asks his assistant to arrange for the seat in such a manner. And he also gives instruction and says, whoever seeks passport may please be ushered in. So, yes, sir, he says and goes out. And then Bhagurayana speaks of his own situation. Well, I now have to betray Malayaketu, the prince Malayaketu. Malayaketu is so very friendly with me, but I have to prove treacherous to him. So this Atisandhana, ityaho dushkaram. So he is doing it against his will. So Malayaketu has come to trust Bhagurayana so very much, and now he has to sabotage the entire plan of Malayaketu, and he feels sorry for that, but he also says that Kimiti Paratantro Vimshit. Well, I am a person who is dependent upon another, and one who is Paradhina can, after all, not take all his own decisions and make his own moves and so on. A person who is totally dependent upon another person has to be averse to three things. So regarding his family prestige, and regarding his sense of shame, and regarding his good name, and even his own dignity. These four things he has to be averse to and serve the cause. And therefore, it's as though I have sold my body and I'm only just carrying out the command of the master. So, Kimiti Paratantro Vimrsh. I am helpless, but I have to sabotage the plan of Malayaketu. And then enters Malayaketu. Malayaketu is in a state of confusion. We can see that this happened in the case of Malayaketu even earlier. So he is given to overhearing others' words. So this kind of eavesdropping is not quite dignified, though it can be sometimes justified. So it is not always a very good thing. And um, here he is actually in a state of confusion. So he says, Vikalpa Bahulyat. So Akula me buddhi. My mind is in a state of confusion. So his inability to arrive at a clear sizing up of Rakshasa and his abilities. So they are going to prove very detrimental to the progress and success of Malayaketu. And therefore, he says, well, I'm not really very sure of myself. And he says, Chetas Chiram Brahmit. My mind is really roaming this way, that way, here and there, hither and thither. And it is almost like the wheel of the potter. So, Aurudha Kulala Chakramiva. So, um, I do not know whether this fellow has real and true and full loyalty to the Nandas, or is he going to join Chandragupta Maurya? So, um, is he a Satyasantha and is he loyal or not? So, I'm not able to very clearly ascertain, because even earlier Bhagurana had sown seeds of confusion in the mind of Malayakit. We can see the wisdom of Chanakya in all this, in seeing that he attempts to things to be almost a bloodless coup. So, of course, it's not always possible, and even here there is some amount of the violence and death and so on. But a large-scale warfare is very skillfully averted by Chanakya. So it is a total crushing defeat for the enemy, Malayaketu and Rakshasa combined, and yet with a very minimum of deaths. So that is this accomplished, and um, the whole scheme of things of the entire play is a matter of just 2 months or 3 months, and the enemy combined, so they have very many allies, and they had a very vast army. So, in fact, it is doubtful whether Chandragupta himself could have mustered such a big army and all that. But how to sow seeds of dissension? So Chanakya had that skill. So he knew when to employ Sama, when Dana, when Pheda, and when Danda. And as you can see in his Arthashastra, he always speaks against Danda. So never march against the foe, never declare war against an enemy, because it will result in a great deal of loss of life and property and so on. And therefore, there is never a desirable thing. So solve everything by Sama only. Sama is sweet words and a pleasant approach and appealing to the noble instincts of the enemy and so on. So by sweet words, so by sheer diplomacy, if you are able to attain your goal, it is very well and good. And if it fails, then try to tempt the foe with dana, with making some offerings and some conciliation and some give and take and so on. And therefore, rather buy peace than declare war. And therefore, if it demands some amount of some kind of giving gifts and so on, well, such a kind of compromise can also be tolerated as long as the fundamental goal is not affected. And thirdly, if these two fail, if Sama and Dana fail, then Veda has to be employed. So sowing seeds of dissension in the enemy camp. And that is what is being done here. So things are all set for Danda. So as you can see, in the just previous act, Malaiketu is all set for marching against Chandragupta. And the army is almost ready now. So he had given a quick march order for the army, and it is in such a moment that the whole disaster is to be averted. And Chanakya, who could almost predict the course of events, had predicted that this is going to happen, and just before this would happen, he knew what is to be done, and that was essentially sowing seeds of dissension in the enemy camp, and therefore he creates rupture between Malayaketu and Bhagurayana on the one hand, Malayaketu and Rakshasa rather, on the one hand, and Malayaketu and the other kings, so who are his allies, so most of them Mlecha kings, so Hunas and Mlechas. So a dissension is developed between these two camps, and therefore ultimately Malayaketu can easily be crushed, and therefore success is ensured. And therefore, in this conversation, Pratihari, the portress, tells Malayaketu that Bhagurana is busy giving passports to people who come in need of that. And then Malayaketu has now grown so close to Bhagurayana that he says, I would rather like to have a small play and fun. I would like to go from behind Malayaketu, behind this Bhagurayana, and close his eyes from behind. So I want to have some fun with him. And so be silent, he says, and Pratihari says yes. But before that happens, there is the entry of the servant, and he gives the information that he is Kshapanaka, and he wants a passport, and therefore he wants to see Bhagurayana, and Bhagurayana is sent him inside. And even as he enters, so Bhagurayana is able to recognize him. Hare Rakshasasya Mitram Jivasiddhi. So, Hare, I know you are Kshapanaka, you are Jivasiddhi. So Jivasiddhi is his name. And he asks him, are you then indeed going for the to serve some purpose of Rakshasa that you are going? So Nakalu Rakshasasya Prayojanameva Kinchit Uddishya Gamyate. So Kshapanaka is also from Chanakya's side, and Bhagurana is also from Chanakya's side. Siddhartha, of course, is, and we can see that the situation is comparable to the situation in Bhasa's Pratignya Yogandhara, where he says, where the enemy realizes, Mahasena realizes that, see, Prakara Torana Varjam Sarvam Kaushambi Khalvidam. So, except the Prakara and the Torana, except the arch, the main arch gate, and the forts, everything is infiltrated by the enemies, and therefore the most trusted friend of Malayaketu here is Bhagurayana, who is from Chanakya's side, and a very good friend of Rakshasa that Kshapanaka was from Chanakya's side, and therefore Bhagurayana is inquiring whether he is accomplishing some goal of Rakshasa that he is now moving out. And Kshapanaka gives a very unexpected reaction. He closes his eyes and says, Shantam papam. So you will be averted. So I will go to a place where I would not hear the name of either the Rakshasa or any Pishacha. So Rakshasasya Pishachasya va nama pinashturi. We find here that there is the play on the word Rakshasa, and though Rakshasa is the name of the person, the other sense of Rakshasa, namely a demon, so he is exploited here. We find this even in the mouth of Malayaketu shortly. We find that the Malayaketu is thrown into utter confusion, and he doesn't know that Rakshasa is a reliable person. So even though Rakshasa was utterly loyal, so Malayaketu is made to doubt the very fidelity and integrity of Rakshasa, and even he calls Rakshasa an Anarya. So he is extremely angry. So with Rakshasa, and the play on the word Rakshasa is made here in the mouth of Kshapanaka, and later in the mouth of Malayaketu also. And Kshapanaka is saying, I'm not going either with to any place. I'm going to a place where the name of neither a Rakshasa nor Pishacha is heard. And then Bhagurana says, well, Rakshasa is your dear friend, and I think you're pretty angry with him. So, in what way has Rakshasa offended you? And Shapanaka says, well, he has not offended me. So, I have offended myself. So, these words of Shapanaka are puzzling to Bhagurayana, and he says, you're only heightening my curiosity. So, I would like to know. And Malaiketu is overhearing these words. So he also says to himself, Ahamapi Shotimicham, I too would like to know. So what has happened between Rakshasa and this Kshapanaka, who were rather close. So it is only a nominal fight that we saw in the last act between Kshapanaka and Rakshasa. So where Kshapanaka suggested some muhurta, and Rakshasa was upset, and he felt that this certainly was not a good muhurta, and Kshapanaka defended his position, and Rakshasa, still dissatisfied, was making some inquiry about some other astrologer who could be consulted and so on. And that looks like almost a silly quarrel, just a mere difference of opinion. But then something serious seems to have emerged. Now, the task of Kshapanaka, so is coming to an end, and he has no more business with Rakshasa, and the assignment that was given by Chanakya to Kshapanaka, that is about to be accomplished, and therefore he is now feeling free to move away from Rakshasa. And so Malaiketu is actually worried about the integrity of Rakshasa, because Bhagurayana had already sown seeds in his mind that Rakshasa's eyes are set on Chandragupta, and the moment Chanakya is eliminated, it looks like Rakshasa is aspiring for a position in the court of Chandragupta, and probably he may be aspiring to become the minister of Chandragupta, because it is Chandragupta is going to be the ruling king and so on. So such seeds of suspicion had already been sown by Bhagurayana in the mind of Malaiketu, and therefore Malaiketu is eager to know anything that happens to Rakshasa, and therefore Malaiketu is eager to hear what exactly happened. And Kshapanika, in order to whet the curiosity of Bhagurayana, says, oh, what is the point in listening to something that one should not hear? So, Kimanena Ashrotavyena Shrutena. And Bhagurayana says, well, if it is a secret, I'm not going to compel you. So then Shapanaka says, no, it is not something which is very secretive, but let me tell you, it is something very painful. And Bhagurayana says, if it is not a secret, then why don't you speak out? Then Shapanaka says, of course it is not a secret, but I don't want to tell. Then Bhagurayana exercises his power and says, then I'm not going to issue the passport. And then Kshapanaka, okay, I have to tell you now. So he says these words himself and begins to tell what it is all about. So it's 11:30 now. And so we shall close for today and continue this in the next session. Namastarvebhyah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. So we shall close today.